It's time to look at one of the most important and powerful composition and arrangement tools, doubling. Doubling is basically what it sounds like, two instruments playing the same part either in unison or sometimes in octaves. In the world of rock and metal, this is most common in riffs, with two guitars playing the same riff, for example. Doubling a part gives it more power and fattens the sound, and it also draws more attention to that musical phrase. This is something that's done in every style of music. Think of Beethoven's Fifth, or the Imperial March, or a jazz combo playing the head or melody of a tune. So this technique works across genres, but I'm going to focus on this more as it relates to prog. There's a lot of different ways to use this technique in rock-based music, starting with the most important, the rhythm section. The most basic approach here is to have the kick drum, bass, and rhythm guitars all playing the same part. This is simple and straightforward, but very powerful, and it draws the listener's ears to that part, usually a riff. This also translates super well in mixes, and as I've delved more into the production side of things, I found I favor the doubling approach the most with the rhythm section, as it just sounds bigger and more intense. Now, there are many cases where it makes sense for rhythm instruments not to be doubled. I did a whole lesson on writing bass parts recently where I talked about some good techniques for constructing bass parts, ways to make the bass feel like its own instrument when the music calls for it. The most important thing I think about when deciding when to double a part, and this goes for any instrument, is what part or parts do I want to be heard the most in an arrangement. If there are 5 different musical ideas happening at once, for example, it's going to be nearly impossible for each of those 5 parts to grab the listener's attention. Sometimes this can be done on purpose to create a cacophony of sound where lots of ideas are happening at once. But usually this type of thing comes from bad arranging. For example, I used to write a lot of different parts between the 2 rhythm guitars and the bass, and then have keyboards and vocals on top of that, and each of these ideas were cool on their own, but when it came to the final product, there was so much going on that each of these cool parts got lost in translation. It would have made more sense in most cases for the rhythm section to all focus on one cool idea, provide a strong unified foundation, and then have the keys and vocals sit on top of that. That would create the same effect, but with a lot more clarity, and would allow for every part to be heard. Instead of trying to cram 4 or 5 ideas together, it often makes more sense to focus on 1 or 2, and then maybe explore the other ideas in a different section of music. With the rhythm section, my general approach is this. If I want things to feel huge and powerful, I focus on doubling parts, and if I want something to sound more intricate and involved, I'll have the 2 rhythm guitars play different parts, or have the bass do something different. The second verse of the 4th wall is a good example of these 2 sounds. It starts with the rhythm guitars in unison, and then the right guitar joins the keyboard figure that's happening underneath. Typically, if I was to take the more intricate approach, I would do that in a section that only featured rhythm instruments or maybe a vocal on top. Splitting the rhythm section into multiple parts while also having layers of keys and vocals and orchestration is usually not a great idea. I want the rhythm section to provide a strong, solid foundation for the whole arrangement. Sometimes the riffs are the focus and you can split up the rhythm section, but I usually double up most of the rhythm parts. It's added a lot of cohesion to my arrangements overall. The This is also a super useful approach for melodies. Doubling up a melody with other instruments draws even more attention to that melody. This melody from my song Surface Tension plays with just the guitar the first time, and at the end of the song is doubled with synth for extra intensity. Doubling melodies in octaves is also a great idea and can thicken them up. In the last repeat of the chorus melody in my latest single, Paramnesia, I doubled the higher melody an octave down. The verse from Broken Epistemology also features this octave idea, even layering 3 different octaves in the last verse.
Tattoo off the skin, naked bread. No place for me to stay, plant my flag in. Should fix that. No place for me to play, sacrifice the altar for the deed.
Fast, flashy lead parts benefit greatly from doubling as well. This crazy section from the Great Stereopticon has all of these fast leads played on guitar, synth, and harpsichord, and it makes them extra beefy. These tapping runs in Cosmic Void are doubled with piano, synth, strings, and guitar. So doubling up leads and melodies works well, but it also works well for the inner parts of a song, the parts that aren't the rhythm section or the melody. Background guitar figures, keyboard layers, orchestration, background vocals, auxiliary percussion, whatever extra instrumentation is in the arrangement. I'll often use synth pads or strings or something similar to thicken up big melodic sections, for example. I'll double a couple of different sounds on the same part for the textural difference. In the chorus of Paramnesia, there are 2 pads and strings playing the same part. In the bridge of Broken Epistemology, the background vocals are doubled with pads, clean guitar, and strings.
Behind the lens, sing through us. In dreams we never.
Another common background figure is faster arpeggio or scale runs. These I almost always double. This arpeggio line in the fall is doubled with clean electric guitar and acoustic guitar. In the fourth wall, these descending scale runs are played by synth, pads, electric piano, and staccato strings. Another useful technique is to have the background instrumentation double parts of the rhythm section or parts of the melody. I often have a keyboard doubling riffs or parts of riffs. This riff in 5/4 is doubled with a low synth. With the higher pads and strings I mentioned earlier, I'll often have those catch the melody instead of just playing big blocked chords. In the chorus of Broken Epistemology, the pads catch the vocal melody, and that helps them gel more into the overall arrangement. This chorus is a good example of how doubling parts can create cohesion through the whole track. The rhythm section follows the rhythm of the vocal melody, and the pads catch part of the melody. All of the parts are working together even though they're not all in complete unison.
Caught behind the camera, I can't see the prisons made for those who believe we're free. Caught behind the camera, I see.
So when does it make the most sense to double parts? The main thing I consider is what feeling I want a section of music to have. If the goal is to have things sound big and focused, I'll double more parts, but if I'm going for a more involved or chaotic sound, I'll layer more parts on. And this isn't a one or the other type of thing. There are different levels to each of these sounds. It's pretty bland to have every instrument in unison all the time, and it's too crazy to have every instrument playing something different all the time. You can lean into one side or the other more depending on the mood of that section of music. The other important element here is contrast. If every part of a song is just riffs doubled by all the instruments, it can get pretty monotonous. It's nice to vary the amount of doubling throughout a song for textural changes. The beginning of my tune Cosmic Void is a good example of this. It starts by adding layers until there's 4 different parts happening at once, and then it kicks into the next section where every instrument is either playing or accenting these fast scale runs. It gives both of these sections more of an impact to have that contrast in textures. Doubling is a technique that's worth exploring, either for adding more power to a part, or changing the texture, or for helping to create a clearer and more focused arrangement overall. I've found my compositions have a lot more clarity since I've started to double parts more often. If you enjoyed this lesson, subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share. Till next time, stay proggy.